Hey, this is Rockets. This is the most important video you can watch in 2021, January, for politics. The thing that everybody needs to know is to look at the bias of the people who are telling you things. If you think about what Trump did, if you look at what he did, if you look at what he says, look at what he wants, classic narcissist, he wanted to be the best president. In his mind, what he thought it took to do that, those are the things that he did. He tried to do those things. If you look at Biden, you can figure out what his aim is. You can look at what he does. You can look at what he says. You can think about what I'm saying. You can think about what my bias is. I had 5 friends come home from foreign wars thanks to Trump. I got $16,000 extra thanks to Trump as far as tax reliefs and not having to pay fines to Obamacare for not having insurance back in the day. Just a ton of things like that. Uh, my hometown got 3 more factories. The jobs came back to the U.S. Just you know, on and on. No nuclear deal for like fucking Iran. The nuclear deal for Iran was really there was a nuclear deal for India in 1954. The IAEA then was assigned to monitor them, and and then in 1974, India weaponized. Well, the IAEA is also the group that's monitoring Iran after the Iran nuclear deal. And then and it's problematic, right? So there's other aspects. So there's the bias of the people that tell you different things, what they think, what they want, what's making them money, right? So like the things that they're selling, right? So Trump's selling like you know apparel, his name, his brand is his name. He's nihilistic, and you know what he wants. And then Biden is just taking taking money for selling us out. It is what it is. Uh, right now, I don't know if that's the case because you can see him on video. He doesn't actually know what he's signing. He admits that. And now he wears an earpiece all the time, and you'll see him like say what he is signing actively like a robot because it's being read to him. And then there's videos out there where you can see where he walks by a marine and it says, uh, salute the marine, and he just says salute the marine. He just says it because it's what the earpiece says. It's just it is what it is. But then the other thing is like the political parties. Like, if you're a Republican, you've got the groups like conservatives, you've got libertarians who think like the market's just going to fix itself magically, which we know that that's not true. If you look at cases like Enron, Enron's basically turning on and off the power in California to make more money. Okay, because they trade energy equities, so they would just turn the power on and off. And so, like, that is immediate proof that, yeah, you can't, the free market's not going to just fix itself and stop things. People are going to make money in the worst ways. Like, it's just like, you can think about it with game theory. People make their best move possible. I'm trying to think what the name is. The Nash equilibrium. People will make their best move possible. And you can depend on that, and you can program for it. I personally am not, I'm leaning away from saying that I'm conservative or anything. I would say that I would more like, uh, oriented around like people who have degrees and things, or own businesses and have successful businesses. Those are the kinds of people that should be managing our stuff. And I would also point out at this time that the majority of Trump's businesses he files bankruptcy on, and there's a financial gain to that. I wouldn't consider that a success. It's kind of like a push, right? Because his businesses stay going and he makes more money, but to say it's successful is kind of like, he's just gaming the system, which is his best move, right? It's the Nash equilibrium there. And so then you have these other groups that are in the libertarian, the liberal side, right? You've got the Democratic Party. We have a two-party system, so all these groups have to fall into either GOP or Democrats. No one else is going to win. I don't care what anyone says. Those are the only parties that are ever going to win, and that's a function of how our gerrymandering is set up, and and how it's winner take all. And for more on that, I think that you can look that up or Google that. Like, I hesitate to give you any names of people that would actually tell you about that I think would be a good source. The other thing that I would say is that I was talking about the groups in the Democratic Party. So you've got really far left people, anarchists, and then you have like moderates, and you have the globalists, which Biden's a globalist, Bush was a globalist, Bush was GOP globalist, uh, and people who aren't putting America first. Now, as far as like people who are putting America first, it's pretty much just Trump, as far as I've seen since maybe Reagan. I don't know. I don't know if Reagan was a he kind of like walked the line. He did some globalist things because I believe he initiated NAFTA, right? NAFTA was an agreement for Mexico basically to steal our jobs. Now, you can think about it however you want. You don't have to agree with that statement, but that's my bias, right? So you think about what I'm saying, you're thinking about the bias. So, like, whatever news you receive has a bias behind it. So you always have to think about the bias. And so, good or bad, whether you like NAFTA, and I think everybody should do this, right? Like, if you receive news from someplace, they should say, like, these are the good things, these are the bad things. So, like, if you look at Obamacare, yeah, everyone got health care in some way, the Affordable Health Act, and you were going to get charged whether you had it or didn't. So in theory, you should have gotten it. But at the same time, I think on the other side, $3,000 deductibles, $2,000 fines for poor people who don't have it, and they have to have a means to get access to it, and they have to have like literacy to like apply for it. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, anyways, there's good and bad to it, right? So you know, and that's a big problem in our political system is because these things are complex and there are multiple solutions, but there are only two parties. So there end up being these tribalism elements, and you kind of have to make an assessment of which way you're going to go. And then on top of that, you have like moral concerns. Like if you're more religious, like very anti against abortion, then you fall more toward GOP because that tribe kind of has that group in it. And then the liberal or Democrat side also has the people who are like pro-abortion, pro-choice, and then you have like really horrible things that happen where like someone is raped and they want to get an abortion, and then so like now you have like people in the GOP who now more agree with that or don't, and so like things become more gray. It's not really good to think about things in an absolute. And there's concepts like if you have if you're going to make laws, you don't want hard cases. Hard cases make bad law because they're so cut and dry, right? It's really easy to decide. But if you have a gray case and a gray area, then you have a more mitigated and organized law that comes out of it, right? Uh, and that's important because politicians, political parties are lawmakers. That's basically their job. That and finance, budgeting the country, right? So there's like law, and then there's also a management section, right? And then there's anyways, it gets pretty complex from there. I don't really want to get into all the detail that you should have gotten in like high school or whatever extent you went for education in politics. But the bias is the important thing. Like the most important thing that everybody needs to be aware of is the bias. Like so like one person's saying this is an insurrection and people were told to kill people, but if you look at like the other side, you're like, well, he said be peaceful. He said gather. He used terms like fight for your country. Did he mean figuratively? Did he mean literal? So there's a bunch of context and assumptions that people are making, and it's very divided on the party lines. And it's a very divided country right now because these issues have come to like their limits, right? And it's always been a big issue. Like people who owned slaves used to be Democrats. The first Democrat was Andrew Jackson, and he had slaves. The first Republican was Abraham Lincoln, and he abolished slavery. So like uh, in my terms, my focus and my bias, I think that the Democrats are pure evil. Like that's what I think. Uh, and I'll probably die thinking that. Is it true? We don't know, right? Like because like I said, there's only two parties, so all these good people are in both parties, and all these bad people are in both parties. There's only two parties. You have the Antifas, you have the Nazis. And then I bring up those two examples, but the important thing to know about those two groups is that there's less than 5,000 of them in the whole country, right? Like there's just not that many Nazis, there's not that many Antifas, but they're on the news all the time because these people are very iconic for the events that are political that they go to. The Berkeley, whatever you would call that kind of a fight that they had, right? Like throwing Pepsis at each other, hitting each other with bats, wearing baseball helmets. It's just it's kind of a ridiculous situation. And then there's all these other people that are like, paid protesters. Like if you have a protest, this is another important thing, right? Ever since the dawn of protests in the U.S., which was like, Shays Rebellion, if you will, right? I mean, whenever, who shot first in the Revolutionary War? Some of these wars that started with like a shot, and such things like that. There's always paid actors, right? So like if you don't like what a group is doing and they're protesting you, you can just pay people to be shitheads in that group. Like that's a thing. You could just stage that. Uh, Not you personally, not me personally, but a person of that motivation. That's the way to thwart that. Like if your employees are on strike and you want to make them look bad, or you want your employees to feel sympathy for you, then you just put bad actors in that strike thing, secretly. So there's that element, right? So there's these biases, these things that happen in these different groups, and all of these motivations need to be considered. And money is a very big part of many of these things, right? It's like who's paying whom, why are they getting paid, and whose money are they taking, and what are they doing? Because there are some things where like they want to control stuff for the benefit of money, you know. So so all of these things matter. And then there's this big debate, was the election stolen? Was it not stolen? Well, it's worth so much money. The election is worth so much money globally, not even just in our country, that of course there are election fraud and hackings and all this other bullshit. Like if you think that it's not, it's it. I had a high school election that was rigged. Okay, like it's absolutely people are doing bad things. Like there's no doubt. Now, as far as like there's video and there's affidavits and there's just a straight up denial of evidence, that's total bullshit. And I I I was just shocked, that no one investigated it. I have no idea if that's deep state or if that's just a fear that that's going to happen every year. Like I don't know exactly. I think that there are. It's really hard to unpack something like that, right? Because both sides, there were Republican judges and Democrat judges who just didn't want to evaluate that. Uh, it's just like a Pandora's box they don't want to open, right? Because they know both sides are going to have that issue, and it's just going to be a big thing. And to a certain extent, there's an amount of just like protecting the country that they want to manage in that, right? So that it's a that's a very complex issue. And this video isn't really about that as much as just like evaluating, why people were or weren't in favor of that as a biased standpoint, because that's the most important thing. Is that when you when you look at our politics or when you look at anything political, you you need to be aware of the biases behind them. That's the important thing, and that was the point of this video. Uh, that and to also emphasize the importance of tribalism, right? So like, yeah, we're divided. Yeah, it's bad, and yeah, it's tribal. But you also know why it's tribal. Like there is a two-party system, so you kind of have to be tribal if you care about what's going on. If you don't want to pay as many taxes, or if you want to pay more taxes because you want to support certain groups, so like the poor or whatever, whatever your bias is, if you care about something passionately in the U.S., you're then therefore going to be passionate about politics in some manner, or if you're just like concerned about your personal paycheck or your family, or like the healthcare bill or whatever it is. So uh, and and a lot of these things run really deep, right? So you'll have like a family member who was in the military during X president's rule, and they did something or they didn't do something, and it was life changing for your family or your family member, and so that'll be a big deal to you. If Clinton got your family killed in Benghazi, obviously you're very GOP tribal, and then if Trump, deported your aunt, and as a result, you now are looking after your nephew, uh, you know, you're very tribal the other way. That's probably a bad example, but I mean, uh, my bias is what it is, and that's my heuristic ability is to reference these two things that are really accessible to me. And so, but that is to say that there are probably examples that are more in favor of the Democrat side, but I will not be able to come up with them probably. And then I'm gonna make this into kind of like a short video series. I plan to make like maybe 4 or 5 of these because there are a few things that are like really complex, some things that are really out there, like crazy, that need to be like probably discussed, or that I wish to discuss anyways. And I think the value of them is like really high. I think it's probably the most important thing that any person could possibly do. And I want to make this video because I feel like there aren't enough people out there, saying like, hey, this this is a complex thing. There are two sides. It's not just one way, and this is my bias. There's not enough people doing that, and I think in every case, there's bias. Every case. And so I don't want to like put my bias on my shoulder all the time in all the videos, but I do want it to be like the primary thing that people are evaluating is the bias before they evaluate the thing. So like today, there's a stock market event going on. I wanted to touch on this. I'm going to touch on it in another video. There are politicians who are reacting to it. They're on the same side. There are politicians that are reacting to it in another way. The SEC hasn't actually made a formal response that I've seen. Some of these brokerages have made it so you can't trade certain stocks. It favors certain groups, mostly the wealthy, in my opinion, because again, I'm not a very wealthy person. My personal bias is that you should be able to trade equities. If you don't have a lot of money, I think you should still be able to trade them. And so that's probably a more popular opinion just because it's the majority of people aren't rich. Uh, but yeah, so my next video is going to be all about the stocks. I'm going to probably post these all on YouTube. I'll try to give them titles. I'll try to number them in sequence. If I fail to do that, I just got lazy, I guess. I don't know. But that is what I plan to do. All right. Thanks.